This is what everybody in the country is looking at right now on their biggest investment, right? Which is their
Mhm.
house. And yes, I'm going to call it an investment because I've seen owning a house change people's lives. Period.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. The recommendation, I've heard people like Grant Cardone say, "Hey, don't buy a house.
yeah,
Don't buy a house.
yep.
Rent, rent, rent."
Gary Vaynerchuk, same thing, right?
Yeah. I just simply, hey, ton of respect. Those guys are far more successful than I am, but I disagree because I've seen it firsthand over it. I mean, for over a decade, I've seen
Yeah.
over 2 decades.
Yeah.
I've seen people greatly benefit from at least owning the house they live in.
Yeah.
Anyway,
100%.
go ahead.
100%. So
Yeah.
closed price. And so for some of these stats, when they were really wild, I pulled up the year before because the last year and a half, we've kind of been in a very similar market as you're going to see here. So starting off with the closed price, December of 2022. So a year and a month ago today, right?
Okay.
Our median close price for all of the Denver Metro MLS. So part of that includes some stuff south all the way to the Springs, up to a little bit of Fort Collins, just the whole footprint of the Denver MLS was $532,500. Okay. That's the median.
Okay.
December of 2023, 1 year later, $535,000. So $2,500 difference year over year. So flat, absolutely flat.
Flat. Yep.
And I went back, I was like, all right, what did it do the year before? Because we've been seeing, 10% appreciation over the last few years, right? Well, in December of 2021, it was 521,000. So really in the last 2 years, 24 months, we are up essentially $11,000 in value. That's 1% over the last 2 years. Now, if you look back a year prior, it was like mid 400s. So yeah, we skyrocketed in 2020, but I was surprised to see that. What's your take? I mean, when we talk about the average price appreciation being 6% in the Denver metro market, what do you say to someone who looks at this and goes, shit, your market's been flat for 2 years. You're about to crash.
Well, I acknowledge the flatness. I would not confirm the crash. You and I both, at least that I'm not a crash predictor, and I don't think there's a crash coming. But
Yep.
if you just think of the laws of averages, right? I was born in the 70s. Since the 70s, we've had an appreciation, depending on your source, of between 5 and 6%, right? So that's a pretty darn accurate number, confirmed by multiple sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've had multiple years of double digits, of course you're going to see a flattening. Of course you're going to see a slowdown. It can't go up 10% every year indefinitely. And that people are getting the mass formation, I call it, or the sickness, the insanity when you hear these and I've heard these agents talk about it's never going to stop. It's a runaway train. No. I mean, history.
Yeah.
What's the saying? I mean, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes.
Yeah.
So of course, if we've had an average of 5 to 6% over my entire life, and I'm in my 40s, I'm going to bet that we're going to have an average of 6% moving forward. So when we see a few double-digit years, we're going to have a leveling off.
Yeah.
Now, why did that happen? Well, we had interest rates, right? But why hasn't it dipped? A lot of people ask it. Why hasn't it dipped? Well, inventory. Why isn't there more inventory? They're not building fast enough, and people are not exiting their house. People get addicted to that lower interest rate. They might have locked in 2.5%, 3% when we're at the in the insanity of COVID, and we hit those really, really low rates, and everybody refied, and now they're stuck.
We're up from last year, year over year, just a tiny bit. And as long as we continue our spring trajectory, we might be up by a couple percent this year, right? It might just slow. But I was pretty interested to see. I didn't know we've been basically flat for 2 years straight, right? I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, I think, the saying that real estate is local, and it's really local, is true, right? And I still see, even though things have slowed down and, dare I say, normalized, right, relative to the insanity that happened, with the shutdowns, and then everybody was everybody who wanted to move tried to move, and all that. But now it's more normal. Now I am seeing in these nicer neighborhoods, the more desirable neighborhoods, I'm still seeing 5 6, 7 offers
Yep.
on one place.
Yep.
And in other neighborhoods, so I have a client right now buying, and she beat them up with inspection items, beat up the seller. And I mean, beat up the seller. I hadn't seen a contract like this in 5 years. And the seller's like, agreed, agreed, agreed. We'll do it all.
Yep. 100%.
And it was, and I even told Brian, I'm like, hey, the seller's market is over.
Yep.
Because I hadn't seen anything like that in many years. So it depends on the neighborhood.
Yep.
It depends on the deal. And that sounds about normal to me. Doesn't that feel a little more normal?
Yeah.
I mean, the last few years we had institutional buyers rushing in, the Vanguards and the BlackRocks. I mean, it's at one point I saw a stat, some of those guys were buying 30 to 50,000 houses a month, right? They were going hard in the paint. Now that's not just in Denver, but that's across the board, right?
Yeah.
But they were going hard in the paint. And, when we were battling out, us and our clients were battling out trying to get, new home buyers their first 3-bed, 2-bath, and they were being beat out by all these cash buyers. I'm like, where are they coming from? It's not that many Californians moving here. No. There's not that many Texans moving here. And part of that was institutional capital. Well, obviously institutional capital has stopped their acquisition frenzy.
Yep.
And that's helped normalize everything. And yeah, it feels like it felt 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, doesn't it?